There's a name that echoes across generations, a name tied to bonnets, pioneer wagons, and the quiet strength of a girl who grew up on the American frontier. That name is Laura Ingalls Wilder. To millions, she's the spirited Laura from Little House on the Prairie, the fiery, curious girl played by Melissa Gilbert on TV. But long before the cameras rolled, long before the harmonica theme played, Laura Ingalls Wilder was a real woman. A writer, a mother, a survivor of a hardship, and one of the most influential voices in American storytelling. And the truth about her life? It's even more powerful than the books. Because behind the stories of prairie sunsets and schoolhouse days was a woman who lived through drought, fire, loss, and poverty, and turned it all into a legacy that would inspire millions. Today, we're going beyond the TV show, beyond the fiction. We're uncovering the real facts about Laura Ingalls Wilder, the woman who wrote the Little House books, shaped a nation's view of pioneer life, and left behind a story far deeper than most people know. Let's begin at the beginning. Laura Elizabeth Ingalls was born on February 7, 1867, near Pepin, Wisconsin, a tiny settlement in the woods, far from cities, electricity, or modern comforts. She was the second daughter of Charles and Caroline Ingalls, the real Charles and Caroline, whose lives would become the foundation of the Little House series. Now, if you've read the books or watched the show, you know the basics. The family moved often. They built homes from scratch. They survived blizzards, locusts, and illness. But here's a fact most people don't know. Laura's childhood was even harder than the books let on. The Little House series, while based on real events, was edited for younger readers. Laura and her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, shaped the stories to be hopeful, moral, and family-friendly. But the reality, it was often brutal. Take the winter of 1880-1881, the one made famous in the long winter. In the book, the Ingalls family is trapped in their home in De Smet, South Dakota, as blizzard after blizzard buries the town. They burn the insides of furniture to stay warm. They grind wheat kernels one by one to make flour, and they survive, barely. But here's what the book doesn't say. That winter, 7 people died in De Smet from starvation and cold. The trains stopped for months. There was no mail, no food, no hope. And Laura, just 14 years old, later said, "I thought I would never see spring again." Yet in the book, she turns that terror into courage. She shows Pa making music, Ma keeping calm, the family holding on, together. Because that was Laura's gift. She didn't just survive hardship, she transformed it into hope, and she did it through writing. But her journey to becoming a writer wasn't easy. As a young woman, Laura became a teacher at just 15. A common practice then, but still shocking by today's standards. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse miles from home and boarded with a family during the term. She earned $14 a month and sent every dollar home to help pay off her father's debts. Later, she married Almanzo Wilder, a farmer she met in De Smet on August 25, 1885. Their life together? It wasn't the happy ending the books suggest. In fact, it was marked by tragedy. Their first child, a son, died just 9 days after birth, a loss Laura wrote about only briefly, but one that haunted her. Then, in 1888, Almanzo suffered a stroke, likely from diphtheria, that left him partially paralyzed. Laura, now in her 20s, became the breadwinner. She took in sewing, raised chickens, and even started a small fruit business. And their daughter, Rose, was born healthy, but their financial struggles continued. They lost their farm. They moved often. They faced drought, debt, and despair. But Laura kept going, and years later, when she was in her 60s, something changed. Her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, was a successful journalist and writer. She encouraged Laura to write about her childhood, not as a memoir, but as a children's book. And so, at 65 years old, Laura began writing Little House in the Big Woods. She wrote in pencil on yellow legal pads at a small table in her Missouri farmhouse. She didn't write quickly. She didn't write for fame. She wrote to preserve a vanishing way of life, one she feared would be forgotten. And when the book was published in 1932, it was an instant success. Then came Farmer Boy, about Almanzo's childhood, Little House on the Prairie, On the Banks of Plum Creek, and eventually 9 books in the series. They were praised for their honesty, warmth, and vivid portrayal of pioneer life. But here's a fact many don't know. Laura didn't write the books alone. Her daughter, Rose, played a major role. Rose edited, restructured, and polished the manuscripts, often rewriting entire sections. She pushed Laura to add drama, tighten plots, and make the stories more engaging. Some scholars even argue that Rose was a co-author, though Laura always received sole credit. And Laura, she never claimed to be writing pure history. She said, "I wrote the truth as I remembered it, and as it should be remembered." Because her goal wasn't just to tell her story, it was to teach values, self-reliance, faith, family, and resilience. And she did. But the books weren't without controversy. In recent years, critics have pointed out problematic portrayals, especially the famous line, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." It appears in Little House on the Prairie, spoken by Pa, and reflects the racism of the time. Laura didn't write it to endorse it, but she didn't challenge it either, and in 2018, the American Library Association removed her name from a major children's literature award due to these depictions. It was a painful moment, but it also sparked important conversations about how we remember history. Not to erase it, but to understand it, and Laura herself. She wasn't perfect. She was a product of her time, but she also showed growth. In later books, she included more respectful portrayals of Native Americans, and she once wrote, "We lived in Indian country, and we should have asked their permission to be there." A small sentence, but a powerful one. And now, let's talk about something beautiful. Laura didn't become famous until she was an old woman. She published her first book at 65. Her final book, The First 4 Years, was published after her death. She died on February 10, 1957, just 3 days after her 90th birthday, in Mansfield, Missouri, the home she and Almanzo built together. And though she never saw the TV show, never met Melissa Gilbert, never heard that harmonica theme, her words lived on, and they changed the world. Because the Little House books have sold over 60 million copies. They're translated into dozens of languages. They're taught in schools, and they've inspired generations to value hard work, family, and the quiet courage of ordinary people. But perhaps the most touching fact about Laura Ingalls Wilder, she never wrote for glory. She wrote because she believed the story mattered. She once said, "Those were hard times, but they were good times too. The best times. Not because life was easy, but because they were together." And that's the heart of her legacy. So let's share a few more little-known facts about this remarkable woman. She started writing at age 65, proving it's never too late to begin. She never graduated high school, but became one of America's most beloved authors. She lived through 9 major disasters, including fires, droughts, crop failures, and disease. She and Almanzo were married for 64 years, one of the longest marriages in American literary history. She didn't drive a car until she was 75, but once said, "I'd rather ride in a covered wagon." Her home in Mansfield, Missouri is now a museum, visited by fans from around the world. She hated the nickname Pioneer Woman. She just saw herself as a wife, mother, and farmer's wife. She wrote every morning, rain or shine, often before breakfast. She believed in kindness and once gave away her last loaf of bread to a hungry traveler. She never watched the TV show, but letters from fans brought her joy in her final years. And here's one more. When the Little house books were first published, Laura didn't want to be famous. She asked her publisher, "Please don't put my picture on the dust jacket. I don't want people staring at me." But today, her face is on stamps. Her name is on schools. Her words are in hearts. And her story, it's not just history, it's inspiration. Because Laura Ingalls Wilder wasn't just a writer, she was a survivor. Mother, a pioneer, not just of the land, but of the spirit. She showed us that you don't need wealth, fame, or comfort to live a meaningful life. You just need love, courage, and the will to keep going, no matter how deep the snow. So, the next time you hear the harmonica play or see Laura running across the prairie in braids, remember, that girl was real. Her name was Laura. She lived. She loved. She wrote, and she gave us a gift that still warms us today. The quiet, enduring truth that home isn't a place. It's the people you build it with, and that's the greatest fact of all.